I could not breathe. The world narrowed to the silver scar that bisected his left eyebrow, a jagged line of moonlight forever etched into skin I knew better than my own. It was a map of my greatest sin, a landmark of the night I had fought with the desperation of a cornered wolf and plunged my cursed blade into the flesh of a warrior whose only crime was defending his territory. Lord Kalen of the Obsidian Fangs, the Wolf of the North, the monster from the fireside stories my pack used to tell its pups, was here, in our great hall. And as his gaze, one stormy gray, the other clouded by the memory of my steel, found mine across the crowded room, a force like lightning struck me, stealing the air from my lungs and branding a single impossible word onto my soul. Mate. Wait, before the next revelation unfolds, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To ensure you don't miss unexpected claims, broken bonds, or awakenings under the moon, subscribe and stay close. Now, back to the scene. My blood ran cold, turning to slush in my veins. It was a cruel jest of the moon goddess, a punishment so exquisitely painful that it could only have been designed by a deity with a taste for irony. The man I had nearly killed, the source of my sleepless nights and the phantom ache in my own side that mirrored the wound I'd given him, was the other half of my spirit. His scent, a dizzying mix of winter pine, cold stone, and furious power, crashed into me, bypassing all my defenses and laying claim to a part of me I never knew was empty. It was a homecoming and a death sentence. My pack's alpha, Alistair, was speaking, his voice a droning buzz in the background, something about treaties, alliances, and a new dawn for the Silverwood Sentinels. His words were meaningless noise against the roaring in my ears. All I could see was Kalen. He hadn't moved, his body a study in predatory stillness, but I could feel the shock rippling off him in waves. His jaw was granite, his broad shoulders tense beneath the fine black tunic that marked his station. I saw the moment the bond hit him, too. A slight flaring of his nostrils, a flicker of disbelief in his good eye that was quickly swallowed by a dawning, terrible rage. He knew. By the goddess, he knew. He might not recognize my face. I had been masked that night, my hair bound, my scent masked by mud and desperation. But the soul does not forget. The mate bond screamed the truth between us. Panic, sharp and visceral, clawed its way up my throat. I was nothing in this pack. Ilara, the quiet healer's apprentice with a haunted look and an orphan status. I kept my head down, my hands busy with poultices and herbs, my presence so minimal as to be almost invisible. It was the only way to survive, the only way to keep the secret that festered inside me. No one knew I was the Borderland Ghost, the rogue fighter who had held off an Obsidian Fang patrol for 3 moon cycles, fighting with a ferocity that had become a minor legend in the territories. They didn't know I fought not for glory or land, but for the life of my younger brother, Leo, whose sickness required a rare moonpetal herb that grew only in that contested slice of forest. Kalen took a step forward, and the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. His gaze was locked on me, a physical force that pinned me to my spot near the back wall. The pack members around me, sensing the shift in power, shuffled away, creating a clear line between the visiting alpha and the pack's most insignificant member. I felt like a rabbit caught in a hawk's shadow. My own alpha, Alistair, finally noticed the suffocating tension. He followed Kalen's gaze, and his eyes landed on me, a frown of confusion creasing his brow. "Lord Kalen?" Alistair asked, his voice betraying his unease.
"Is something amiss?" Kalen did not answer. He didn't have to.
The air was thick with the undeniable energy of a fated connection, a scent so potent that even the dullest sensed wolf in the room could feel its weight. Murmurs erupted. A fated mating, here and now, between the visiting alpha and who? Little Alara? It was impossible. It was a miracle. For Alistair, it was a political godsend. His eyes widened, the confusion melting into avaricious delight. A fated bond between our packs would seal this alliance more tightly than any treaty written in ink. It was a gift from the goddess herself. For me, it was the hangman's noose. Kalen's voice, when he finally spoke, was a low growl that vibrated through the floorboards. Her. He didn't point. He didn't need to. Every eye was already on me. Who is she? That is Ilara, Alistair said, puffing out his chest. He gestured for me to come forward. A healer's apprentice. It seems the moon goddess has chosen to bless our union in a most profound way. Every step was a march toward my own execution. My legs felt like lead, my hands trembled, and the scent of pine and fury grew stronger, more overwhelming, until I felt I would drown in it. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, unable to meet the piercing stare that I knew was dissecting me, searching for the warrior he had fought in the moon-drenched clearing. When I finally stood before him, the proximity was agonizing. The bond writhed between us, a living thing, pulling us together while his rage pushed me away. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, the raw power coiled in his muscles. He was even larger up close, a mountain of a man forged in battle and hardened by responsibility. The scar was starker, a pale, jagged accusation on his bronze skin. He leaned down, his voice a whisper so low and menacing it was meant only for me. I know you. I flinched, my eyes snapping up to his against my will. In them, I saw not the joy of a wolf finding his mate, but the cold, hard promise of retribution. He remembered the scent beneath the mud and desperation. He remembered the feel of a soul that matched his own, even as it tried to kill him. "I don't know what you mean, my lord," I whispered, my voice trembling. It was the weakest lie I had ever told. A muscle in his jaw jumped. "You will tell me everything," he snarled under his breath, his gaze burning with a hatred that scorched the very core of our newfound bond. "Or I will tear the truth from you piece by piece." Alistair clapped his hands together, oblivious to the declaration of war that had just been whispered between fated mates. "A celebration! This calls for a grand celebration. The future Luna of the Obsidian Fangs has been found in our hall." The pack erupted in cheers, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart, hammering out a rhythm of pure terror. I was trapped, mated to the man I'd maimed, engaged to an alpha who saw me as a political prize, and carrying a secret that would not only get me killed but could very well drag both our packs into a bloody war. The goddess wasn't just ironic, she was cruel. And my punishment had only just begun. The days that followed were a special kind of hell, a gilded cage where the bars were made of my own fear. I was moved from my cot in the healer's den to a guest suite in the main lodge, a room larger than any I had ever lived in, with silken sheets and a balcony overlooking the valley. I was given new clothes, soft tunics and leather leggings that felt foreign against my skin. To the pack, I was Cinderella, the forgotten orphan suddenly elevated to the highest honor. They saw it as a fairy tale. I saw it as the calm before the storm. Kalen was a constant, menacing presence. He insisted we spend time together, a demand Alistair was only too happy to enforce for the sake of appearances. We walked the training grounds, his long strides forcing me into a near jog. We ate our meals together at the high table, the silence between us a chasm of unspoken accusations. He was playing a part for the pack, a grudgingly accepting mate, but whenever we were out of earshot, his mask would drop. "Did you think I wouldn't recognize you?" he asked one afternoon as we stood by the river that marked the edge of our territory. His voice was dangerously soft. The bond doesn't lie. It told me everything. It told me the soul of the woman who drove a blade into my side is the same one that's supposed to complete my own. I stared at the rushing water, my hands clenched into fists. I was desperate. "Desperate enough to kill?" he shot back. "You fought like a trained assassin, not some forager who wandered off course. Who sent you? Was it a test? An initiation into some secret cadre of spies?" No, it wasn't like that. My throat was tight. How could I explain the panic of watching Leo fade day by day? His breath rattling in his chest, while our own healers shook their heads and spoke of fate. How could I explain that I would have fought 100 Alpha warriors to save him? Then what was it like? He pressed, stepping in front of me, blocking my view of the river, of escape. He loomed over me, his shadow falling across me like a shroud. "Talk, or do you only speak with a blade in your hand?" The insult stung. I did what I had to do. "You ambushed my patrol, you injured 2 of my best men, and you tried to put me in the ground," he growled, his good eye flashing with remembered fury. All without a word. "Who are you, Ilara?" The question hung between us, a question I barely knew how to answer myself. I was Ilara the healer, Ilara the orphan, Ilara the sister. And I was Ilara the ghost, a fighter born of desperation. The two halves felt like strangers, and I didn't know how to make them one. More importantly, I couldn't tell him the truth. Admitting I did it for an illegal herb to save my brother would not only condemn me, but would put Leo in danger. Alistair's law was absolute. The pack's resources were for the strong. My sickly brother was already seen as a drain, allowed to live only because of my service as a healer. Seeking outside forbidden remedies would be seen as a betrayal. "I can't tell you," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. His laugh was a bitter, humorless sound. "You can't, or you won't. It doesn't matter. I have a lifetime to figure it out." He reached out, his fingers brushing against the pulse point on my neck. A jolt of pure, undiluted energy shot through me, a direct consequence of the bond. His touch was both a fire and a brand. My wolf, a creature I kept deeply suppressed, stirred for the first time in years, recognizing its mate, craving him despite the danger. I gasped and stumbled back, breaking the contact. Kalen's expression hardened at my reaction. "You feel it," he stated, not a question. "This curse the goddess has saddled us with. It pulls you even though you're terrified of me, and you should be." He turned and walked away, leaving me trembling by the river's edge. "Our engagement ceremony is in 3 days. Be ready." The ceremony was to be a grand affair, a formal joining of our packs. My impending transfer to the Obsidian Fangs was treated like a royal wedding. But every night I would sneak out of my luxurious prison and slip into the healer's den. Leo was getting weaker. The small stash of moon petal I had managed to gather was running out, and its effects were diminishing. "You look tired, Ilara," he'd murmur, his hand, thin and frail, clutching mine. He was only 14, but his eyes held the weary knowledge of a much older soul. He knew I was in trouble. The whole pack was whispering about my sudden elevation. "I'm fine," I'd lie, forcing a smile as I administered another dose of the herbal tea. "He's a scary-looking wolf," Leo said, his voice barely a whisper. "The visiting alpha, they say he's never smiled." "He's powerful," I allowed, the understatement of the century. "Be careful," Leo breathed, his eyes fluttering shut as the herbs took effect, easing his pain. His warning echoed the frantic beating of my own heart. The night of the engagement ceremony, I was dressed in a gown of silver gray that matched Kalen's eyes. It felt like a costume, another layer in the intricate lie my life had become. The great hall was filled to bursting with wolves from both packs. The air was festive, but beneath it I could feel the hum of tension. Our packs had been rivals for generations. This alliance was new. Kalen stood beside me before the hearthstone, the symbolic center of our pack. He was magnificent in his formal black attire, a figure of daunting power and authority. He didn't look at me. When Alistair began the rites, calling on the spirits of our ancestors to witness the union, Kalen's voice was a steady, emotionless baritone as he spoke the ancient vows. When it was my turn, my voice was a threat of sound. I felt like a fraud, a lamb being led to a slaughter I had orchestrated myself. As the ritual dictated, Kalen took my hand to place his clan's ring on my finger. The moment his skin touched mine, the bond flared violently. It was a raw, undeniable force, a current of pure emotion that arced between us, longing, anger, pain, and a sliver of something else, something deeper and more confusing, that felt like possessiveness. In that instant, with our hands joined, the bond gave us a window into each other. I felt a flash of his memory, the biting wind on the northern ridges, the weight of his father's title settling on his shoulders at too young an age, the constant gnawing loneliness of being an alpha. And he, I knew, felt a flash of mine, not the fight, but the emotion behind it. He felt the heart-stopping terror, the all-consuming desperation that had fueled my blade. He recoiled as if burned, his eyes widening in shock. He had felt the why, even if he didn't understand it. He stared at me, his brow furrowed, a flicker of something other than hatred in his gaze. It was confusion. The image of a cold-blooded assassin he held in his mind had just been shattered by a tidal wave of pure, selfless desperation. But the moment was fleeting. Before he could process it, before I could dare to hope, a voice cut through the hall. "A touching scene, but the alpha of the Obsidian Fangs might want to know exactly who he is binding himself to." Every head turned. Standing in the doorway was a man named Silas, a scout from my pack. He was a bitter, ambitious wolf who had always resented my quiet competence. He had been part of a patrol near the borderlands months ago, one I had evaded in the shadows. But clearly he had seen more than I thought. He swaggered forward, a cruel smirk on his face. "I saw her, near the contested zone, the night Lord Kalen was attacked. I thought she was a spy then, but I was warned to keep silent. Seems I should have spoken up." Alistair's face darkened. "What is this nonsense, Silas?" "It's not nonsense," Silas declared, his eyes fixed on me. "Ask her what she was doing there. Ask her where she got that scar on her arm." He pointed to my left forearm, which was covered by the gown's sleeve. It was a thin, white line, a glancing blow from one of Kalen's guards that night. I had healed it myself, but the mark remained. Kalen's gaze dropped to my arm, his eyes narrowing to slits. His voice was deathly calm. "Show me." The world stopped. My breath hitched. This was it, the end of the line. Slowly, my hand trembling so badly I could barely control it, I reached over and pushed up the silken sleeve of my gown. There, against my skin, was the pale, thin scar, a perfect match for a nick in the Obsidian Fang Guard's armor I remembered seeing. It was undeniable proof. Silas laughed, a triumphant, ugly sound. "She's the Borderland ghost. She's the one who almost killed you, my lord. Your fated mate is the assassin you've been hunting." The silence that followed was absolute, a crushing weight that sucked all the air from the hall. Kalen stared at the scar, then back up at my face. The confusion in his eyes was gone, replaced by a storm of betrayal, so profound, so absolute, it was like a physical blow. He didn't just believe it, he felt the truth of it resonate through the bond we shared. The desperation he'd felt a moment ago was now tainted, twisted into cunning and deceit. He dropped my hand as if it were poison. "Is this true?" His voice was no longer a whisper. It was a roar of ice and thunder that echoed off the stone walls, a sound of profound and utter heartbreak. Not for the loss of a love he never had, but for the sacrilege of their connection. The goddess had bound him to his own enemy. I couldn't speak. I could only nod, a single jerky movement. A tear I hadn't realized I was holding back traced a path down my cheek. The look on his face broke me. It was a mask of cold, hard fury, but underneath it, in the depths of his soul that I was now so horribly connected to, I felt a tremor of agony. The agony of a bond betrayed before it had even begun. He turned to the assembled wolves, his face a thundercloud. "The treaty is broken. The engagement is off." He ripped the Obsidian Fang clan ring from his own finger, the one he was meant to give me, and hurled it to the stone floor. It clattered with a sound of finality, a ringing death knell for the Alliance, for my life, for any hope I might have had. "She is a traitor and an assassin," Kalen declared, his voice ringing with the absolute authority of an alpha passing sentence. He looked directly at me, his eyes devoid of any warmth, any connection. All that was left was a chilling, bottomless hatred. "And I, formally, before all witnesses and the spirits of our ancestors, reject Ilara of the Silverwood Sentinels as my mate. Let the goddess sever this cursed bond, and let this wolf be nothing to me." The pain was instantaneous and absolute. It wasn't a metaphor. It was a physical tearing, a sensation of my soul being ripped in half. I screamed, a raw, animal sound of pure agony, and collapsed to the floor. The world went black, but not before I saw the matching spasm of pain cross Kalen's face. He stumbled back, his hand clutching his chest, a look of shocked anguish in his eyes. He had wounded himself just as surely as he had wounded me. The rejection was a blade that cut both ways. But as darkness claimed me, I knew only one of us would be left to bleed out alone. I woke to the smell of damp stone and despair. My body felt like it had been trampled, every nerve ending screaming in protest. A dull, cavernous ache resided in the center of my chest, a void where the bond had been. It was a hollow echo, a phantom limb of the soul, and its emptiness was a constant, throbbing agony. I was in the Pax dungeon, a small, lightless cell reserved for traitors. My silver gown was torn and muddied, a mockery of the future that had been stolen from me. The rejection had not fully severed the bond. A true severing was rare, requiring a complex ritual or the death of one mate. A formal, verbal rejection was like taking an axe to a tree. The tree might fall, but the roots remain, deep and entangled. I could still feel him, a faint, distant hum of fury and pain on the edge of my senses. And I knew he could feel me, my own misery, a bitter taste on the back of his tongue. Alistair came to see me once. He didn't enter the cell. He stood on the other side of the iron bars, his face a mask of cold disappointment. "You have ruined us, Ilara," he said, his voice flat. "Kalen and his warriors have left. The Alliance is dust. There are whispers of war, all because of you." "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "What you meant doesn't matter. What you did does," he retorted. "You acted as a rogue. You attacked the son of an allied Alpha. You concealed your treason. By all our laws, you should be executed." I squeezed my eyes shut. I had expected this. "However," he continued, and a sliver of hope I despised flickered in my chest, "your execution would be seen as an admission of guilt on behalf of the pack. It would make us look complicit. For now, you will remain here. Kalen will demand justice, and we will decide then what form it will take." He turned to leave. "My brother," I croaked, pushing myself up. "Leo, is he—" Alistair paused, his back to me. "Your brother's condition has worsened. Without your supplemental care, he is fading." His tone was indifferent. To him, Leo was a loose end, a weakling better off culled. His fate is no longer your concern. The despair that washed over me was so profound it was suffocating. I had failed. In trying to save Leo, I had condemned us both. I was trapped in a dungeon, and he was dying in the healer's den, all because of me. Days blurred into a miserable haze. I refused the meager food they brought, the pain of the broken bond and my guilt having stolen my appetite. I grew weaker, my body and spirit withering in the darkness. The phantom connection to Kalen was a constant torment. I felt his restless anger, his sleepless nights, the way he paced the battlements of his fortress miles away. And through it all, there was a thrum of pain that mirrored my own. He was suffering, and a dark, selfish part of me was glad. One night, I was drifting in a state between waking and sleep when a new sensation pricked at the edges of the broken bond. It wasn't Kalen's familiar, distant turmoil. It was a thread of curiosity, of suspicion. It was him focusing on the memory of our brief connection at the ceremony. He was re-examining it. He was feeling that flash of my desperation again, the one that didn't align with the cold, calculating assassin he believed me to be. He was starting to question. Why? What had made a lone wolf fight with the ferocity of a mother defending her cub? Where had she learned those moves? And why, when he looked into her soul, had he not seen malice, but pure, unadulterated fear and love? The questions were a faint echo in my mind, a sign that the Alpha of the Obsidian Fangs was not a man who left stones unturned. His investigation started miles away, but I felt its ripples. He sent scouts back to the borderlands, not to prepare for war, but to talk to the settlers, the trappers, the hermits who lived between the territories. He was digging. He was hunting for the truth. Meanwhile, my world had shrunk to the 4 stone walls of my cell. My own pack treated me as if I were already dead. The guards who brought my water wouldn't meet my eyes. Only the old healer, Elspeth, who had been my mentor, showed any sign of pity. One evening, she slipped an extra blanket through the bars. "He's asking for you, little wolf," she whispered, her voice heavy with sorrow. "Leo?" My heart seized. She nodded grimly. "The death rattle has begun. He hasn't long." A sob escaped my lips, a raw, ragged sound. "Please, Elspeth, let me see him. Let me say goodbye." Her eyes were filled with tears. "I cannot, Elara. Alastair's orders are absolute, no one in or out." That night, I felt the true meaning of hopelessness. I lay on the cold stone floor, listening to the drip of water in the darkness, and prayed to the goddess for a swift end for my brother, for an end to his pain. I had destroyed his only chance. As my grief crested, a strange thing happened. The broken bond flared. Across the distance, Kaelin felt the sheer, undiluted agony that poured out of me. It was not the pain of a trapped traitor. It was the soul-deep grief of a sister mourning her brother. It was an emotion so pure and selfless that it could not be faked, and it was the final piece of his puzzle. I felt the shift in him, the sudden, staggering realization. It was for someone else. She was fighting for someone else. His focus sharpened, his investigation now having a direction. He sought out information not about border skirmishes, but about the Silverwood Pack's internal affairs, about a promising young healer and her chronically ill younger brother. He learned of Alastair's harsh laws, of the culling of the weak, of the desperation that must have driven me to seek a forbidden cure in his lands. The truth, when it finally coalesced for him, was a devastating blow. I felt it through the bond like a seismic shock. His rage, which had been a constant burning fire, did not vanish. It simply changed its target. It shifted from me to Alastair, to Silas, to the pack that would let a child die and force a sister into such an impossible choice. And then, most terribly, it turned inward. He had rejected his mate. He had condemned her without a trial, blinded by his own pain and pride. He had left her to rot in a dungeon while her brother died. His agony was a sharp, piercing blade in my own chest. The guilt that washed over our broken connection was so strong it almost made me sick. And then came a new feeling, one I hadn't felt from him before. Urgency. He was coming. I didn't know how I knew, but I was certain of it. He was coming back. But he wasn't the only one making a move. That same night, the lock on my cell door scraped open. I looked up, expecting the guard with my water. Instead, Silas stood there, flanked by two other wolves I didn't recognize. Their eyes held a predatory gleam. "Alastair is a fool," Silas sneered, stepping into the cell. "Leaving you alive is a liability, a loose end. He wants to hand you over to Kaelin for justice to save his own skin. But I think it's better if Lord Kaelin finds a tragic accident." Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through my grief-stricken haze. They were here to kill me, to silence me for good, so their version of the story would be the only one left. "My death won't stop him," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "He's looking for the truth." Silas laughed. "The truth is what the living say it is, and in a few minutes you won't have much to say at all." He lunged. Adrenaline surged through my weakened body. I rolled away, scrambling to my feet. My healer's training was useless here, but the instincts of the borderland ghost were not entirely gone. I was weak, starving, and emotionally shattered, but I was not broken. I dodged a clumsy attack from one of the other wolves, using his momentum to send him stumbling into the wall. But it was 3 against 1. Silas was strong, fueled by ambition and cruelty. He cornered me, his claws extended. I braced myself for the killing blow. And then, the world exploded. The stone wall of the dungeon blew inward in a shower of rock and dust. A massive, terrifying shape stood silhouetted against the moonlight, its eyes glowing with incandescent fury. A wolf. A wolf larger than any I had ever seen. Its fur the color of midnight, its teeth bared in a snarl that promised death. Kalen. He had shifted. He was a blur of motion, a force of nature unleashed. The 2 wolves with Silas didn't stand a chance. He was on them in a heartbeat, a whirlwind of claws and fury. They fell with whimpers of terror and pain, incapacitated but alive. Kalen was an alpha. He did not kill another pack's wolves without cause. But Silas was another matter. Silas, seeing his men dispatched so easily, turned to flee. Kalen shifted back to his human form in a fluid, dizzying movement, naked and fearsome in the moonlight streaming through the hole in the wall. He caught Silas by the throat, slamming him against the far wall with enough force to crack the stone. "You set her up," Kalen snarled, his voice a low, guttural rumble of pure rage. "You used her desperation to try and start a war, to advance your own position." Silas choked, his face turning purple. I only told the truth." "You told a fraction of it," Kalen corrected, his grip tightening. "You left out the part about a dying boy and a corrupt pack that would rather let him perish than bend a rule. You left out the part where she was fighting not as a traitor, but as a sister." He threw Silas to the ground at Alistair's feet, who had just arrived with pack guards, his face pale with shock at the sight of his destroyed dungeon. Kalen ignored them all. He turned to me, and his eyes, stormy gray and filled with a pain that mirrored my own, found mine in the darkness. The fury was gone, replaced by a raw, devastating shame. "Elara," he breathed, my name a prayer and an apology. He took a step toward me, but then his gaze fell to my gaunt face, my tattered clothes, the raw despair in my eyes. He saw what his rejection, what his pride had done to me. And he stopped, the chasm between us feeling wider than ever. "Her brother," Kalen commanded, his voice ringing with an authority that Alistair could not deny. "Take me to him, now." The healer's den was quiet, the air thick with the scent of sickness and impending death. Leo lay on a small cot, his chest barely moving. He was pale as parchment, his breathing a shallow, ragged whisper. Elspeth sat beside him, bathing his forehead with a cool cloth, her face a mask of weary sorrow. When we entered, a huge, imposing alpha followed by a ghost-like Elara, Elspeth gasped and rose to her feet. Kalen's eyes locked on the frail boy, and the last of his defenses crumbled. This was the reason. This small, dying child was the cause of everything. The fight, the scar, the lies, the rejection. He looked from Leo's face to mine, and finally, he understood the depth of my sacrifice. I rushed to Leo's side, my hands fluttering over him, tears streaming down my face. "Leo, I'm here. I'm so sorry." His eyes flickered open, but they were unfocused, glassy. He didn't know me. "He is too far gone," Elspeth said softly. "The moon petal, it only held the sickness at bay. Without it, the fever has consumed him." Kalen knelt on the other side of the cot. He reached out, his large, calloused hand gently touching Leo's forehead. A soft, golden light emanated from his palm. It was alpha power, a raw, vital energy that few possessed. He was pouring his own life force into my brother, trying to fight back the darkness. "It's not enough," Kalen grunted, sweat beading on his brow. "The poison, or whatever this is, it's too deep." I watched, my heart breaking. He was trying to fix what he had broken, but it was too late. I had failed. He had failed. "There is one other way," Elspeth said, her voice hesitant. "An old legend, the ritual of the mended bond. It is said that when a bond is broken by rejection, it can be reforged. The ritual creates a surge of pure life energy, enough to heal any wound, cure any sickness. But it is dangerous. The pain is said to be 10 times that of the rejection. It can kill one or both of the mates." Kalen looked at me, his eyes asking the question he wouldn't speak aloud. Could I bear it? Could I trust him enough to willingly walk back into that fire, a fire that had almost destroyed me? There was no choice. For Leo, I would do anything. I would walk through hell itself. "Do it," I said, my voice clear and steady. We faced each other across Leo's cot. Alistair and the others watched from the doorway, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. Kalen took my hands. His skin was warm, a stark contrast to my own icy flesh. "Elara, I am sorry," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "for my pride, for my blindness, for not seeing the truth of your heart. I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I will spend the rest of my life earning it if you will let me." "Just save him," I whispered back. "Save my brother." He nodded, his jaw set. "The ritual requires a vow, an oath of absolute truth to bind our souls together again." He took a deep breath. "I, Kalen of the Obsidian Fangs, accept you, Elara of the Silverwood Sentinels. I accept your past, your strength, your sacrifice. I see you, and I claim you as my mate, my Luna, my other half. Before the goddess and all witnesses, my soul is yours." As I spoke my own vow, echoing his words of acceptance and claiming him in return, the world dissolved into light and pain. The agony was breathtaking, a supernova exploding in my chest. It was the feeling of being torn apart and stitched back together, every nerve screaming, every fiber of my being unraveling and reweaving itself. I cried out, my hands gripping his, my only anchor in a storm of torment. Kalen roared, his own body convulsing with the force of the mending bond. But through the pain, there was something else, a warmth, a feeling of coming home. The hollow void inside me was filling up, the phantom limb regenerating, the connection between us sealing over, stronger and brighter than before. His strength poured into me, and my own resilience flowed back to him. We were no longer two broken halves. We were one, forged in fire and pain. The energy that erupted from our joined hands was blinding. It swirled around us, a vortex of golden light, before pouring down into the small boy lying between us. Leo's body arched on the cot, and he let out a great gasp, his lungs filling with air. Color rushed back into his cheeks. The feverish heat receded from his skin. The rattling in his chest ceased, replaced by deep, even breaths. When the light faded, we were left kneeling, panting, our bodies trembling with exhaustion and relief. The bond was whole, a quiet, steady, unbreakable cord that hummed between us. It was scarred, imperfect, but it was ours. Leo's eyes opened. They were clear and focused. He looked at me, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Elara?" I sobbed, throwing my arms around him, burying my face in his shoulder. "I'm here. You're okay." Over his head, my eyes met Kalen's. The gratitude, the love, the profound relief that passed between us in that single look was more powerful than any words. He had come back for me. He had faced down my pack, healed my brother, and walked through fire to mend what he had broken. He had earned more than my forgiveness. He had earned my heart. The aftermath was swift and decisive. With the truth revealed, Alistair's authority crumbled. Faced with the fury of a slighted alpha and the disgust of his own pack for his treatment of me and Leo, he was forced to step down. Silas and his cronies were exiled, cast out to fend for themselves as rogues. A new, more compassionate alpha was chosen to lead the Silverwood pack. Kalen did not rush me. He gave me time and space, remaining with his warriors at the Silverwood Lodge while I focused on Leo's recovery. My brother healed with astonishing speed, the alpha energy having not only cured his illness, but also bolstered his own latent shifter strength. For the first time in his life, he was not frail. He was strong and whole, and his laughter filled the healer's den. During that week, Kalen and I spoke. We walked by the river again, but this time there was no tension, no accusations. We simply talked, sharing the stories of our lives, the burdens we carried. I told him of my parents, lost to a rogue attack when I was young, leaving me to raise Leo alone. He told me of his father, a hard and demanding man who had prepared him for leadership but not for companionship. We laid our souls bare, and the scarred bond between us began to smooth, to settle. "That night in the forest," he said one evening, as we watched the sunset behind the mountains, "when you fought me, I have never faced a warrior with more courage." "I was terrified," I admitted. "I know," he said, his voice soft. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting in spite of it. You were fighting for love. It's the most powerful force in the world. I was a fool not to recognize it." He reached out and gently touched the scar above his eye. "This used to be a reminder of my failure to protect my border, a mark of shame." He turned his hand, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw. "Now, it's a reminder of the strength of my mate, a reminder that the greatest treasures are often found where you least expect them, and that they are always worth fighting for." When the day came for him to return to his own lands, there was no question of my going with him. My place was by his side. Leo, now healthy and with a bright future in a reformed pack, hugged me tightly. "Go be happy, Alara," he whispered. "You deserve it." The journey north to the Obsidian Fang territory was a quiet one. We rode side by side, the comfortable silence between us a testament to how far we had come. His lands were different from my own, wilder, more rugged, a place of stark beauty with pine-forested mountains and icy rivers. His fortress was a marvel of stone and timber, built into the side of a mountain, overlooking his lands. It was intimidating, but with him beside me, it felt like home. His pack received me with a wary curiosity that slowly warmed into respect as Colin made the truth of our story known. He hid nothing, taking full blame for his hasty rejection and praising my courage. I was not just the Luna who had come as part of a political treaty. I was the Luna who had fought for her family, who had endured injustice, and who had been claimed by their alpha through a trial of fire. Our new normal was quiet but profound. I found my purpose not just as a Luna, but as a healer, my skills a welcome addition to their pack. Kalen was a respected and demanding alpha, but with me, he was different. He was tender, attentive. His earlier coldness melted away to reveal a man of deep passion and unwavering loyalty. The bond between us was a constant, gentle hum, a source of strength and comfort. There were no more secrets, no more lies. One night, months later, we stood on the highest battlement of the keep, a cold wind whipping my hair around my face. The stars were brilliant in the clear northern sky. Kalen came up behind me, wrapping his strong arms around my waist, pulling me back against his chest. We stood in silence for a long time, watching the moon rise over the jagged peaks. He rested his chin on my shoulder, his breath warm against my neck. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. I knew which one he meant. Not the rejection, not the mending. The first one, the one that started it all. I reached up, and my fingers found the faint, silvery line on his brow. The scar that had once been the map of my sin was now a part of him I loved, a testament to our impossible beginning. "Sometimes," I whispered, "I think about the warrior I wounded in battle." He turned me in his arms, his stormy gray eyes soft in the moonlight. "And I think about the woman who saved me from myself." He leaned down and kissed me, a slow, deep kiss filled with all the pain, forgiveness, and love that defined our story. In the heart of the wild north, under the watchful eye of the moon goddess who had been so cruel and so kind, the outcast healer and the warrior Alpha had finally found their peace. We were scarred, yes, but we were whole, and we were home.